I still remember Earth. Not fondly, of course. One rarely has a warm spot for the place that almost ended you. We were scavengers, my crew. Not the violent kind, not marauders or pirates. You don't survive long out in the black with that mentality. We collected relics, abandoned tech, the scrap civilizations bolder than ours left behind. The universe is littered with forgotten treasures, if you know where to look. For me, it's never been about the profit. Sure, hole can line your pockets well enough, but that fades. It's the unraveling of a mystery, touching the cold circuits of something so far removed from your own existence. That's what makes the endless drift worthwhile. That's how we stumbled on Earth. There was no big announcement, no flaring signal amongst the usual cosmic chatter. It was a flicker of energy on our long-range scanners, barely above the threshold of notice. An anomaly. Most times, those are echoes of stellar events, remnants of a long-dead sun going supernova. Yet, this one had a pulse, an oddly artificial rhythm. Intrigued, we deviated from our plotted course. It took a few cycles to track it down. Earth was tucked away at the edge of its solar system, a tiny blue marble shrouded in ice clouds. Primitive camouflage for a primitive species, we'd chuckled back then. How wrong we were. Initial scans painted a picture of a young world, barely into its spacefaring age. Their radio chatter was laughably simplistic, their satellites little more than glorified toys. A backwater species, ripe for exploitation, if exploitation were our game. We were weeks away from our next planned resupply at the outer colonies, running low on certain essentials. Perhaps a brief visit to Earth would be in order. A touch and go, as we dubbed it. Stock up on basics, a bit of their crude fuel, and then vanish back into the vastness of space. That was the plan, at least. It was Commander Kale who raised the first note of concern. A quiet man, Kale, with a knack for sniffing out trouble where others saw opportunity. They're quiet, he'd said, staring at the readout scrolling across his console. Too quiet. Quiet. What's that supposed to mean? I scoffed. They're barely a blip on the galactic stage. What noise did you expect? Kale pointed at the screen, his antennae drooping in a gesture that mirrored human worry. They're comms networks. They're vast, spanning the entire globe. Yet, barely a whisper on most frequencies. The chatter that is there, it's encrypted, layered with security I've never encountered on a world this primitive. I scoffed, but there was a creeping unease settling into my gut. This was starting to feel less like a simple resupply and more of something we hadn't fully considered. Perhaps their broadcasts are simply focused, beamed transmissions, I'd argued, hoping to quell both Kale's concerns and my own rising doubts. We are far out in their system. They can't have detected us. His antennae twitched. That's the anomaly, Captain. According to my readings, they should have. Our ship, while old, hardly has a subtle energy signature. Yet, there's nothing but silence from their planetary defenses. It took 3 more scans and a long, tense debate until I relented. Fine, I huffed, we'll divert course, take a detour to their moon. Get closer readings, determine if there's something to be concerned about or if you're chasing shadows. But make it quick. I don't want to waste more time than necessary. The moon was a desolate lump of rock, bathed in the harsh light of Earth's sun. A good place to hide, as it turned out. Clinging to the dark side, we throttled down our engines until we were just another piece of debris. From there, the scan was a brutally different picture. Earth pulsed with life. Invisible to our naked eyes, the electromagnetic tapestry painted a web of activity, communication networks crisscrossing continents, orbital grids chattering with unseen payloads, ground-based energy signatures that made me question if we had misjudged this species entirely. They weren't young. They were concealed. Kale's antennae were ramrod straight with tension. Look at these readings, he hissed, the translator struggling to convey his agitated clicking. They possess a level of energy manipulation we haven't begun to theorize, clean fission, matter conversion at microscopic scales. My head throbbed. Kale wasn't a warrior, he was a scholar with a nose for old tech, not military strategy. Yet, even I could see the implications. These weren't backwards farmers fumbling with their first rockets. They were a society operating on a scale we barely understood, hiding their true power behind a curtain of calculated primitiveness. This was no touch-and-go scenario. This was potentially an extinction-level blunder on our part. Get us out of here, I ordered, my voice hoarse. Chart a course that avoids their entire system. We don't want their eyes on us for a second longer than necessary. Navigation clicked their ascent, already plotting a new trajectory. We crept away from the moon, our collective sense of relief rising with each astronomical unit we placed between us and that deceptively blue world. For the rest of that trip, the atmosphere on the ship was thick enough to cut with a plasma blade. The Earthlings, that's what we ended up calling them, became the silent specter at the back of our minds. A reminder that the universe held dangers far greater than old wars or starving supernovas. It was a lesson carved into the hardened shell of our ship and the hearts of the crew. We completed our resupply at a remote outpost, picking a world known for minding its own business. But the course we charted skirted that whole arm of the galaxy, a version clear in its curve. Some might have called it cowardly. I called it survival. The years tumbled by after that first encounter with Earth. We kept moving, the universe an endless treasure hunt we could never fully explore. Yet Earth cast a long shadow. The scavengers' network is tight-knit, information as valuable as any salvageable tech. News of our near miss dribbled through the usual channels, whispered warnings and exaggerated boasts in dimly lit spaceports. Apparently, we weren't the only ones who'd seriously underestimated the blue marble. Some scavengers, bolder or perhaps more foolish than me, gambled. Quick raids, targeting the outer edges of Earth's system, hoping to snatch whatever they could before the sleeping giant awoke. Most, like us, veered clear. But a handful vanished. Ships gone silent, crews swallowed into the void. No distress signals, no debris, just an unsettling absence where once there'd been a blip on the galactic map. Did Earth strike back? We had no proof. Yet, her disappearances painted a grim picture, a lurking predator, not content with simply defending its territory. This wasn't a species that played at war, it played at annihilation. Fear is a curious motivator. It can paralyze, or it can fuel a desperate sort of ingenuity. For us, the latter took hold. We were scavengers, not warriors, but facing a foe like the Earthlings, survival wasn't just about finding the next haul, it was about having a fighting chance if push came to shove. Our ancient ship, the Nomad, had never seen the inside of a proper shipyard. Patches upon patches held her together, a testament to our skill with a hydro spanner and a whole lot of luck. But now, we poured everything into her. Kale, bless his clicking soul, dove into the Nomad's systems with renewed fervor. Ancient energy transfer arrays, neglected for eons, were repurposed. Defensive shields, designed to weather asteroid fields, were recalibrated against an entirely different kind of debris. We weren't transforming the Nomad into a war machine, she was far too old for that. Our goal was blunter, more primal. If the Earthlings were going to find us, if they were going to pick us apart from the shadows, we'd burn as brightly as a dying star before we went out. It took cycles. Resources scavenged at the far reaches of known space, favors traded and owed in the murky underworld of galactic bartering. Our reputation as reliable, careful scavengers helped. Desperate times had made many rethink the old notions of risk. When the day finally came, even I had trouble recognizing the Nomad. She looked predatory. The smooth lines of her hull were now adorned with jury-rigged energy capacitors, bristling like spines on an enraged beast. Kale had even figured out a way to weaponize our long-range scanners, twisting them into focused energy beams capable of doing some very real damage. On the comms network, some called us mad, others visionaries. Maybe we were both. I certainly felt a bit unhinged the day I gave the order to set course for Earth's system. We weren't going to start a war, the Earthlings held all the cards in that gamble. What we were starting was a very high-stakes bluff. Approaching Earth was an exercise in controlled tension. We cloaked, old technology humming under strain, praying those deceptively primitive sensors on their world wouldn't see through the ruse. Then, we waited just outside the range of their orbital defenses, a silent pebble on their cosmic doorstep. Next came the hardest part, transmitting our message. It was hammered out over several agonizing hours, the universal translator doing its best to convey intent, not aggression, into what we hoped was an understandable format for humans. Greetings from the scavenger vessel Nomad. We acknowledge past trespass in your system. We seek dialogue, exchange of knowledge, the potential for peaceful cooperation. A mix of bold pronouncements and a touch of tail between legs appeasing. Kale was adamant about adding a disclaimer about our upgraded capabilities, a subtle reminder of our sting should diplomacy fail. We attached a basic technical data packet, proof of our advancements, a way to demonstrate we weren't walking into a slaughterhouse unarmed. Then we hit send and held our breath. The response came within a single Earth rotation. Brief, clinical, and terrifyingly efficient. An answer on one of their public frequencies, a broadcast. This wasn't meant for just us, it was a message for their entire world. Unknown vessel, you have violated the Sol System exclusion zone. Identify yourself and your intentions immediately. Failure to do so will result in termination. I slid down my spine. Termination, not negotiation, not apprehension. They were telling us, and anyone else who might be listening, that we were already considered hostile. One wrong move, and it would be over. A tense consultation with my crew followed. There were shouts, accusations, even a few tears. In the end, fear of the unknown outweighed the fear of obliteration. Our reply was a gamble. We are the Nomad classification, deep space scavengers. We admit our past error and offer a full technical exchange as recompense. Our intention is peaceful coexistence. Then came the agonizing wait. Would they strike? Dissect us from afar with weaponry we couldn't conceive of? Or would the lure of our cobbled-together tech outweigh their ingrained hostility? One rotation turned into 2, then 3. We took turns sleeping in shifts, the Nomad thrumming with barely contained energy around us. When the reply finally crackled through, it was on a tight beam transmission, meant for our ears only. Nomad, your proposal is unexpected. We will dispatch a diplomatic envoy to rendezvous at the following coordinates. Maintain current position. Do not engage cloak. Any deviation from these terms will be considered an act of war. We sagged with relief. They'd taken the bait. There would be a meeting, a chance to look this hidden leviathan in the eye and determine if peaceful coexistence, that fragile dream Kale and I clung to, was a possibility, or just the naive wish of a species far out of its depth. The Earthling shuttle looked absurdly small as it detached from the mothership. A solitary egg adrift in the black. It docked with the Nomad with a precision that sent shivers down my spine, a reminder that even in the game of diplomacy, they held the upper hand. Inside the cramped airlock, I couldn't shake the feeling I was being sized up, analyzed. The 3 figures who stepped through into our old ship looked surprisingly ordinary. 2 men, 1 woman, uniforms crisp but free of military insignia. Their faces were a mix of hard lines and studied neutrality. Behind them, the airlock hissed shut, a chilling reminder that they were on our turf now, by their choice, not ours. Captain. One of the men stepped forward, extending a hand. Lieutenant Commander Thorne, Sol Defense Corps, he said. His accent was surprisingly clean of the regional variations we'd picked up on Earth's broadcasts. I met his handshake with what I hoped was a confident grip. Captain Soraya of the scavenger ship Nomad. Introductions of my crew followed, curt and apprehensive. These Earthlings could have blown us out of the sky and walked away clean. The fact that they didn't was either a sign of calculated shrewdness or the most arrogant power play imaginable. Thorne and his companions, Riley and Chen, as they introduced themselves, were ushered into our makeshift briefing room. The Nomad was never meant for hosting diplomatic envoys, but we'd scrubbed down the corner usually reserved for greasy engine parts and laid out our best approximation of refreshments, nutrient packs and water reclaimed from the recyclers. Thorne surveyed the setup with a quirk of an eyebrow but gave no further indication of whatever he might be thinking. His silence stretched. It became clear that despite the journey they'd made, they weren't the ones under pressure to talk. Kale, ever my impulsive second, broke the tense quiet. We offered a tech exchange, he chirped, antennae twitching. Is this of interest to your Sol Defense Corps? Chen, a lean woman with eyes that seemed to miss nothing, leaned forward. The data packet you transmitted is intriguing. And troubling. Troubling. Kale's antennae flattened against his skull, a sure sign of distress. Your ability to adapt existing technology surpasses anything we would have anticipated from a species at your assessed development level, Riley said, his voice flat. I cursed internally. We'd spent cycles agonizing over that transmission, trying to thread the needle between displaying capability and avoiding open threat. Apparently, we'd failed. That was necessity, I said, trying to salvage the situation. Survival in deep space breeds innovation. Indeed, Thorne's eyes narrowed on me, yet the applications of these innovations are undeniably weaponized. Your scanners, for instance. Kale clicked defensively. They are focused beams, yes, but low power. Only for non-invasive analysis of surgical precision, Thorne interrupted, targeting the known weak points of our capital ships. The accusation hung in the air, heavy as a neutron star. I was no military strategist, but even I could see the pieces slotting into place, not in our favor. Chen pushed a data slate across the makeshift table. Our pathetic attempt at encryption hadn't stood a chance against Earthling systems. Displayed on the screen were intercepted Nomad transmissions, threads of conversation about ship vulnerabilities and potential lines of attack, Panicked voices in the wake of our initial Earth encounter, voices that might as well have signed their own death warrants. You've been studying us. Thorn's tone was grim, preparing for confrontation. A sense of futility washed over me. Every careful move, every calculated upgrade, hadn't brought us closer to coexistence. It had just painted a larger target on our backs. And then came the twist. That assessment, Riley stated, fixing his stare on Kale, is partially correct. Partially. My mind scrambled for meaning. Thorn elaborated, you were preparing. But not against us. His gaze swept across my crew. Tell me true, Captain Soraya, how many missing scavenger crews were there in the past decade? Vessels that vanished without a trace. The question hit with the force of a meteor. I felt the blood drain from my face. 7. The word barely escaped my lips, a shameful admission to the horrors we'd only dared whisper of. And there are others, aren't there? More ships gone dark across the stars. You felt it, the way seasoned crews just disappeared. Kale spoke, his voice hoarse. Thorn nodded grimly. We've noticed an alarming increase of anomalies. Incidents beyond the scope of piracy or the usual hazards of space. Your people, like mine, realize something new is out there. Something dangerous. The silence that followed wasn't the accusatory kind. It was a dawning horror, a terrible kind of understanding blooming like a poisonous flower in our midst. Earth wasn't playing galactic overlord. It was preparing for a predator, one vast and unknowable. And we'd stumbled right into the crosshairs of its preemptive strike. A chill settled over the room, the kind that has nothing to do with recycled air or malfunctioning life support. It was the dawning recognition of a greater game, one where we were just hapless pawns. Then why? I choked out the word, why target us? It was Chen who answered, her voice surprisingly gentle yet tinged with something akin to pity. Your mistake wasn't your upgrades, Captain. Your mistake was that first touch in our system. However discreet you think you were, something noticed. And it assumes we're aligned with Earth. Kale's antennae drooped low. A preemptive strike against a potential ally. Thorn nodded grimly. A drastic measure, yes. But in the face of an unknown threat, survival. It demands cold calculations. We sat in stunned silence. The scavengers and the warriors, brought together not by any lofty ideals of cooperation, but by the chilling, desperate need to survive. I glanced at my crew, fear warred with determination on their faces. We'd faced extinction before, clawed our way back from the brink. But this, an invisible enemy that dwarfed Earth's capacity for destruction? It was enough to make even a jaded scavenger lose faith. Then, the absurdity of the situation hit me. A laugh bubbled up, harsh and humorless. So, here we sit. Us, about to be vaporized for a crime we didn't commit, and you, ready to condemn us to curry favor with the real bogeyman out there. Thorn frowned. We could return you to Earth, grant you sanctuary. And tag us as collaborators. I barked. That something out there would see right through that charade. No, if we're going to face annihilation, it might as well be on our own terms. I straightened, meeting Thorn's eyes. You need intelligence, a hint of what's coming. And we need a fighting chance, no matter how slim. Deal? The lieutenant commander considered me for a long moment. It was a madman's bargain, built on desperation and a sliver of hope we probably didn't deserve. But then again, Earth had already gambled once by engaging us. Perhaps they saw a use in a crew hardened by the unforgiving void. Your tech, Thorn finally said, full access to the Nomad systems. Our tactical data in return. We share everything. Everything? Even the really classified stuff? The stuff that makes you break out in hives thinking a lowly scavenger might see it? I challenged. Riley gave a humorless grin. Captain, I believe the hives are a constant state for any military type facing this particular situation. We either trust you, or we're all doomed anyway. It was the worst sales pitch I'd ever heard, but strangely, also the most compelling. The Nomad hummed into overdrive after that. Every data core was linked, every last byte of our cobbled-together knowledge fed into the maw of Earth's frighteningly efficient analysis engines. Their strategists, scientists, experts whose specialties we couldn't even fathom, pored over our findings, our encounters, the subtle anomalies we'd gleaned over years spent at the fringe. Meanwhile, their technicians, under Kale's wary guidance, dissected the Nomad. Shield arrays were augmented, power couplings optimized, and my precious patched-together engines coaxed into a terrifying roar that made the old girl shudder in protest. Every last ounce of energy, every scavenged resource was poured into one purpose: make the Nomad not just able to survive, but to fight. It felt surreal, walking through the corridors of my ship, the familiar hum overlaid with the crisp cadence of Earthling tech. Their presence was measured, respectful even, yet undeniably an occupation. I wondered if this was what those doomed scavenger crews had faced before disappearing, not pirates or raiders, but something cold, calculating, and far older than any of us could comprehend. The transmission came 2 rotations after the deal was struck. A garbled signal on an archaic frequency, something that shouldn't exist within 100 light-years of civilized space. Thorn stood with me before our comms terminal, his face grim. "They're here," he said simply. The message resolved into something I couldn't fully decipher, not language, more like a series of pulses, a pattern that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. It was wrong, like listening to the heartbeat of a dead star. "Targeting vectors," Chen's voice crackled, "it's triangulating. Not on Earth. They're aiming at the Nomad." A test. A poke in the dark to see if their hunch was correct. Or maybe just a prelude to annihilation. "Orders, Captain." Thorn looked at me, not with deference, but the grim acknowledgement that in this insane gamble, I was the senior partner. We scavengers, we knew the void, the terror of the unknown. The Earthlings had the tech, the discipline, but facing this? We'd been living with it far longer. "Get us out of their targeting range," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Then, we play blind man's bluff in the dark." "Evasive maneuvers." I barked the order, echoed a moment later by Thorn to his own crew. The Nomad, sluggish and ponderous in her old age, jolted into motion. Decades of instinct took over, the familiar dance of slipping through the gravitational embrace of celestial bodies, twisting trajectories on a dime, shedding velocity into nothingness. Earth, a comforting bulwark just a short time ago, became a pinpoint of light. Surrounding us was the vast, star-speckled stage where the true battle would be waged, a theater of shadows where the enemy might be anywhere, everywhere. While Earth's finest mind scrambled to translate that chilling pulse signal, I focused on what scavengers do best: fade into the background. We cut auxiliary power, went radio silent, even dialed down life support to a bare minimum. The Nomad drifted, a ghost ship in the inky black. The waiting was agony. Each tick of the ship's ancient chronometer felt like a drumbeat counting down to our demise. The Earthlings, true to their nature, kept busy. Sensor arrays thrummed, sweeping emptiness for any hint of the enemy. Occasionally, Chen would feed us fragments gleaned from the enemy's transmission, disturbing calculations of energy output, predicted weapons payloads, things that made my stomach churn with dread. Then, the spike. It registered not on our external sensors, but the Nomad's internal readouts. A surge of power, not massive, but precisely targeted straight at our cloaked position. "They know." Kale's frantic click echoed my own rising panic. "They know where we are." "How?" I hissed. Earthling cloaking tech was vastly superior to ours, a fact we'd begrudgingly acknowledged for our own survival. Just as quickly as the surge appeared, it receded, leaving a lingering, ionized hum in the ship's lifeblood. We waited, every system on high alert, for whatever blow would come next. Seconds stretched into minutes, then an hour. Still nothing. Only the relentless ticking of the chronometer, marking the passage of time we might not have. It was a test. Thorn's voice barely above a whisper. "Confirming our location. And confirming we're worth obliterating," Riley added grimly. I felt a surge of defiance, a desperate echo of those early days facing Earth's might. "Then let's make them regret the trouble." A flicker rekindled in Kale's multifaceted eyes. "We have their signal, fragmented, yes, but it's a start. Perhaps if we reverse the polarity, emit it on high gain." His antenna clicked excitedly, already visualizing possibilities in the ether. It was the craziest, most reckless plan imaginable, something born out of pure desperation. To fight what lurked in the shadows, we'd have to paint ourselves as the biggest, brightest target in the galaxy. Thorn caught the gleam in my eye, the same shared madness that had brought our two species together against all odds. "A beacon," he rasped, "lure them out. Your emitters are strong, but could they handle that kind of directed pulse?" "Only one way to find out," I said, a grim grin spreading across my face. "And if it fries the Nomad into scrap? Well, better to go out swinging than cowering." The next several hours were a blur of frantic activity. Kale, driven by a mix of fear and scientific fervor, shunted power from every non-essential system, diverting it into our jury-rigged emitters. The Earthlings, surprisingly adept in the art of battlefield improvisation, helped calibrate, jury-rig, and coax power couplings far beyond safe limitations. When the Nomad thrummed with barely contained power, a death rattle disguised as a challenge, we were as ready as we'd ever be. Override security protocols, authorization Omega 0, Thorne's voice was steady, matching the resolve on his face. It probably wasn't a code the Earth military used often, if ever. A good indication we were all about to step into uncharted territory. Silence reigned as we initiated the pulse sequence. It started as a gentle throb, building into a scream tearing its way through the fabric of space. The Nomad shuddered, engines protesting as they channeled power meant to carry us across galaxies into a mad beacon aimed at an unknown foe. Then, in the vast canvas of space before us, a star flickered out of existence. Not the gentle fade of natural death, but a sudden, brutal erasure. A fraction of a second later, something streaked past Earth's outer defenses so fast that tracking systems barely registered its passing. It arced towards us, impossibly swift. And impossibly vast. As it closed in, it wasn't the sleek lines of a warship I saw, but an organic shape, a writhing monstrosity that blotted out the stars. We were the fly, and it was the descending hand, eager to swat us out of reality.